lot of boring tasks like renaming files, editing PDFs, or filling out forms on web pages? Well, so did I until I built this no-code automation system to help me automate the most tedious work that I have to do. It's helped me save hundreds of hours, but the thing that I'm actually happiest about is not needing to do the work anymore. And the best part is you don't need to know any coding to set it up. So in this video, I want to show you what you can do with it, how it works, and how you can quickly set it up yourself to get rid of your most frustrating work. So in this video, I'll show you two examples of things that you can automate with the system, but really they're only examples meant to give you ideas. The only limit is how creative you get with this. So the first example is that I have this folder here with a ton of PDFs in it, close to 100, and they contain people's last name followed by their first name, and then it just says report at the end. So I can just press a keyboard shortcut using the system I'll show in this video. And you can see all of the PDFs are instantly renamed to say first name, last name, report, created on the current date. Now, a second example that we'll go through in this video is a macro to delete all of the pages of the PDF except the first page. So I'll select the folder, I'll press that shortcut, and as you can see, all of the PDFs are edited, and now they only contain the first page. These examples are inspired by work I did for a recent client of mine. If you also have frustrating tasks like this that you wish you didn't have to do, I run a program to help professionals and entrepreneurs automate hundreds of hours of repetitive work. The program is super personalized, so I can only work with a handful of clients at a time, but you can book a free call with me using the top link in the description below to see if you'd be a good fit. Okay, so there are two parts to the system. The first relies on Python, which is a programming language, but again, you won't need to know any coding to use it. I'll show you how to create Python scripts using some pre-written AI prompts. But the Python is what's actually going to do the heavy lifting, like renaming files or modifying PDFs. And then the second part of the system will rely on Keyboard Maestro, which is a simple automation app that will let us run those Python scripts from keyboard shortcuts. So let's get things started by installing Keyboard Maestro. So you can download it from keyboardmaestro.com. There is a 30-day free trial, after which you will have to pay a one-time fee. I have no affiliation to the app, but I think it's totally worth it since it saved me literally thousands of hours of time. But once we install it, we can access that app file from our downloads folder, and we'll need to move that to our applications folder. And then from there, we can open it up. So I'll open this new app. We can press open, and it's going to ask for some accessibility permissions. So let's do open system settings here. And let's check the boxes for both the Keyboard Maestro engine and the Keyboard Maestro editor itself. So now we can close that out. Let's close out system settings. I like to uncheck this tutorial box and close out that tutorial window. But now we have Keyboard Maestro installed, and it comes with a number of default macros or automations, which you can see here. I like to do Command A and press the minus button down here to delete them, just so we can start from a blank slate, and also close out this application window over here. Now, before we get into things further, let's just press the edit button down here so we can start editing new macros. Okay, at this point, the next step in our setup is to use a macro pack, which you can download for free in the description below. This will help us complete the rest of the steps to set up our environment very quickly. So once you double click that file that you can download below, it will open up a number of macros in Keyboard Maestro. Now you'll also notice that a new group, a new folder appeared here on the left, which is called Python Setup. So let's click on that and press Enable Macro Group so that we can run the macros inside here. So essentially what these macros will do is they will speed up the process of installing Python, getting all of our environment set up so that we can start creating these very powerful automations. So let's come to number one here and press Run up top. That will open the terminal and paste in a command, and it will also prompt us to create a new Python scripts folder. Now, this can be anywhere on your device. It could be in your documents folder, which is where I have it set to by default, but it could also be on a cloud folder like your iCloud or Google Drive folder if you want to sync your automations between multiple Mac devices. For now though, I'm just going to leave it with the documents folder. I'll press save, and I had created it already, so I'll replace it. And now it's asking for my password in the terminal. So I'll enter my password for my device and press enter. And it's asking me to press enter again. So now that's going to install Homebrew, which is basically a program that lets you install other programs. And then once it installs Homebrew, it will use that to install Python. So it's normally not the best idea to just run random code from people on the internet. So I encourage you to take a look at this yourself, maybe ask an AI model what exactly it does so that you have a better understanding of what code that we're running here. Now, once we run this first macro, we'll need to come to the second. And by the way, setting this up for the first time took me multiple hours, but now that we have these macros, it should only take a couple minutes. So this will greatly streamline things. But once we come to number 2, we can run it as well. It won't display anything on screen. It's sufficient just to run it as is. And then the third one is to install Visual Studio Code. So let's run this. It will open a link to a website for visualstudiocode.com. Basically, this is a code editor that will let us see our Python scripts. Again, we won't need to actually write any code ourselves manually or no programming to use it. This will just help make things a lot easier. So that is installing, and once that installs, we can open it up. So now that is opening on our device, and I'll walk you through the process for setting this up. So once we open it, there will be a window here that says Setup Copilot. We'll need to click on that, and then you can sign in with GitHub, with Google, or with Apple. Okay, so I just signed in to my account, and now this will allow us to access AI features to be able to write code without knowing any code ourselves. The next thing we'll need to do is come to File, and then we can do Open. So let's press Open. And then here we can select the folder that we created a couple steps ago. So we had created a Python scripts folder in our Documents folder. If you would put it in another location like your iCloud Drive, then you would just select it from there and then press Open. So now we are inside of this folder. We can press trust the authors of the files, and I'll do yes, I trust the authors. And now we're good to go in Visual Studio Code. So let's come back to Keyboard Maestro. We can come to the fourth macro in this list here. And this is asking us to select these two actions here and add them to our favorites. So we can click on one, hold Shift and press the other, and then we can right click and press Add to Favorites. So these two actions are what we'll use to actually run Python scripts from within inside Keyboard Maestro. So I'll just call this Run Python Script and press Add. So we'll come back to this and use it in a little bit. The next step is number 5, to create a virtual environment. So once the first step, which was this one here, to run that terminal command has completed, then you'll see your device name at the bottom, followed by a % in the terminal. So that's how we know that the first one has completed, finished running. And then we can press run on the 5th macro to run a new terminal command. So we'll need to do that after the first one has finished, but once it's done, then we'll just run the 5th one here, and that will create a new folder and something called a virtual environment. So a virtual environment is basically just a special folder on your device where you can install certain programs so that they won't interfere with other programs on your device. So as we're creating these Python scripts, maybe we'll need some special functionality to edit PDF files. So all of that special functionality, those special programs, will be stored in this folder that we just created. But now we've completed the setup and we're ready to actually start creating some new automations. So the first thing that we had wanted to do was create a macro or automation to rename a bunch of PDF files. So I have this folder here with a ton of PDFs in it, and we want to be able to rename these to something different. So before we do anything else, I'm actually just going to make a copy of this folder so we have a backup of it. The worst thing that you want to do is run a program that doesn't do what you expect and have it mess up all your files. So I'm just going to make a backup of it. And now we can access this original one here and use this to test our program. So what we had wanted to do was rename each of these files to say, instead of last name, comma, first name, we wanted to say first name, last name, report, created on, and then we can just have it say created on the current date. So we have all these reports here. Each one of them is different, and we want to just rename those file names. So that's our task. We know that we have a certain folder to do that on. Maybe we would want it to do it on multiple folders, not just this one. So we want the program to be able to run regardless of the name of the folder itself. So let's come in Keyboard Maestro here, and I'll come to the bottom left and create a new macro group. So macro groups are just folders that contain macros or automations. So I'll call this something like PDF automations, and then I'll come to the middle column and create a new macro. So this macro is actually what will run to perform our automation. So I'll call this rename PDFs. And we can add a trigger to it, a hotkey trigger. So this is just a keyboard shortcut that will run the automation as we build it. So I'll do maybe Command-Shift-R to rename PDFs. And then below is where we can add actions that will actually run and perform what we want. So in this case, rename PDFs. So the first thing we can do actually is come to new action, and let's go to the favorites button, this favorites folder here, and double click on this favorited action that we had created before. So run Python script, and that will paste in those two actions that we had added to our favorites. So we'll modify this in just a second. But before we do that, let's add another action. So the next action we can add is just one that's called set variable to text. So there's this action set variable to text. I'll double click it to add it, and I'll actually drag it up to the top of our actions because we'll need that to run before the other one. So the task that we have in front of us is to get the name of this folder with all the PDFs in it. So you can see it's something like users, max productivity, desktop, PDFs. That is the complete path to this folder here. And we'll need to be able to tell our Python program that we create in a second what folder we want to run the script on. It needs to be able to know where to rename the PDFs because we don't want it to rename every PDF on our system. We just want it to rename the ones in a specific folder. So we'll somehow need to get the name of this folder here, whatever folder we have selected in our Finder, because that's what we'll want to run the automation on. So the easiest way to do this in Keyboard Maestro is with this set variable action. So we can just call this new variable, which is essentially a way of storing some text. We're basically trying to store the text with the name of this folder here and put it into a variable. So we can just call this something like folder name, like this. And the text that we want to set it to is the name of whatever folder is selected in the Finder. And the way we can do that is by coming to this button here, Insert Token. And then if we come down to System, there are a ton of options here, but the one we're looking for is this one here, the path of the selected Finder item. So I'll click that, and you can see it inserts this text that says %Finder selection %. By the way, I have an entire tutorial about variables and tokens on my channel if you want to learn more about what they are. But you can see below in the preview that this variable is being set to this path here. So users, max productivity, desktop, PDFs, which is the name of the folder that we have selected. And notice if I click on a different folder, so the PDFs copy, that will also be reflected here. So we've essentially created a way to store whatever path of whatever folder is selected in a variable. And now we can use that with our Python script. So that is the next step in the process, which is to create the Python script to do the renaming of the PDFs. So I'll come back to this Python setup macro group and come to the 6th macro in this list, which you'll notice is an AI prompt. So let's copy this entire thing and come to Visual Studio Code. And again, we are in our Python scripts folder that we created before we had opened it up. And on the right, you'll notice that there is a chat mode. So let's paste in the text that we just copied from that macro. And this contains a prompt that we'll use to create our program. So the key to writing good prompts is actually all included here. So it says, write me a Python script to do something. We'll tell it what to do in a second. But then it says, remember when writing your prompt to be as specific as possible, to give context. So the names of variables that we want to access from Keyboard Maestro. In the case of our PDF automation, you'll remember we use this folder name variable. So we'll need to tell the script that we want to access that variable. The AI prompt also says to give context, like whatever folders or files we're dealing with, and to provide specific examples. We'll want to rename our files with a certain format. So like first name, last name, created on a certain date. So we'll just give an example of what that looks like. And then at the bottom, we can ignore all of this, but that will be useful to include in our prompt. So let's come back to this window, and I'll just select those example instructions here and delete them. And now we can start writing the prompt itself. I'm going to use a tool to dictate what we want to do, but you could just type it out manually. This is entirely optional. So let me start the dictation. Write me a Python script to rename files in a given folder. The folder that you'll want to access is stored in the Keyboard Maestro variable called folder name. The way that I want you to rename the PDFs is as follows. An example of a PDF would be like this. Okay, so I just stopped the dictation because I actually want to paste in the name of a certain PDF to give it an example. So in the Finder, you can press Command-Option-C to copy the file name of whatever file you have selected. So if I come back to Visual Studio Code, then I can paste in the file name of that example PDF that I just copied. So again, Command-Option-C to copy the file name of whatever file is selected in Finder. But let's read what we have so far, and then we can make some changes and additions to it. I'll also close out this window just so we have a bit more space. So right now it says, write me a Python script to rename files in a given folder. The folder you'll want to access is stored in a Keyboard Maestro variable called folder name. And actually the name is a little bit different. So I'm going to copy it from Keyboard Maestro and paste it in the exact format that it's displayed there. And then we say, the way that I want you to rename the PDFs is as follows. An example of a PDF would be like this. Okay, and then now we can say how we want it to look after the PDF has been renamed. So let me continue with the dictation. By the way, this dictation tool is called Whisperflow. I'll put a referral link in the description below if you want to try a month of it for free, but again, I have no affiliation to it and it's completely optional for this process. Rename the file to be first name, last name, report, created on, and then insert the current date. So for the example file above, it would be renamed to the following. Okay, so we just added a couple more sentences, and let's show how the renamed file would look. It would be, instead of Anderson Michael, it would be Michael Anderson with no comma, report, created on date. So now we said rename the file to be first name, last name, report, created on, and then insert the current date. For example, For the example file above, it would be renamed to the following. And then we can just say something like, repeat this process for all of the PDFs in the supplied folder. So now we have our complete prompt, and I'll just press enter or submit the message by pressing that button there. And now we can just wait a couple seconds for this to finish running and generate our script for us. Okay, so the AI model has been running for a minute, and as you can see, it created a new Python file in our folder, and it's asking to test this. So I'll press allow for it to test whether the PDF program is working properly. Okay, so it just ran that test and it seems like everything is working correctly. So let's press keep here, and we can press keep on these different files, and things look good to go. So in this chat window, you could read what it outputted if you wanted to. It's just explaining its process, what it was trying out. When we give our original prompt, if there are certain things that are unclear, it will actually ask a list of questions of things to clarify. So for example, if we had been unclear about where we want to rename the PDFs, like which folder to actually rename, it would have asked us which folder we wanted to access. But in this case, since we followed the prompt and we were very specific about what we wanted to accomplish, we gave an example and we gave context about all of the files and folders we needed to access, it was able to create the script with no problem. But now let's actually test it out to make sure it's working. So the way that we will connect this new Python, this .py file, to Keyboard Maestro to be able to run it from a keyboard shortcut is just by copying the name of this file. So if you press enter on the file name on the left, and then Command C to copy that name, then what we can do is just put that directly into the macro that we had created. So this rename PDFs macro, we'll need to come to the second action here. So this set variable local script path, and where it says test.py, we'll just need to paste in the name of the file and make sure it says the file name .py. So we just made one slight change to this action, and now I think we're ready to test this macro out. So let's come to our PDF folder and select the folder itself. And then again, we had set a command of Command-Shift-R, keyboard shortcut, to be able to run this automation. But now let's test it out by pressing that Command-Shift-R on this folder. And as you can see, it instantly renamed all of the PDFs in this folder. Now, this is pretty incredible. Without knowing any coding, we were able to set up a system to rename all of these PDFs and run it with a single keyboard shortcut. Now, let's say we had wanted to make some changes to our program. As you notice here, it says created on the date, but it doesn't say the hours and minutes. So let's ask the chatbot to actually add that functionality in. So I'll come back to the chatbot here and I'll run the dictation. Actually update the script to include the hours and minutes of the current time when you rename the files, not just the day of the year. So we have our new message, and I'll submit that message and wait for it to run and update the script. Okay, again, it was just running and it's asking to allow me to test the script again. So I'll press allow and see what it does. So it looks like it is working, and we can press keep on this button here to accept those changes. So I'll press keep, make sure it updates every file appropriately. And now we can test the macro again. So the Python script has been updated. Let's come back to Finder, and I'll delete this original PDF folder since those had the updated names. And I'll just make a copy of our backup here so that we can start from a fresh point again. So now let's select the folder, press our shortcut Command-Shift-R. And as you can see, it renamed all of the folders, but it looks like it doesn't have the appropriate time here. So it says created on the date, but then the time just says 00. So whenever we have a case like this, we can just go back to the chatbot and tell it that it made a mistake. When you renamed the files, they did not contain the current hours and minutes. It just said 00-00. Update the script to make sure that it includes the current hours and minutes when the script is run. And now let's submit this message and wait for it to update our script. Okay, so it just finished running. Let's keep the changes and let's test it out again. So let's make a copy of our backup file and run the script, Command-Shift-R. And it looks like this time it did successfully rename the files with the current date and time. And it is in fact 11 a.m. at the time of this recording. So it looks like it worked properly. But this is essentially the process that you would use to create any Python program to work with your macros. You would tell the chatbot in as precise language as possible what you want it to accomplish, and then you would tell it any changes that it needs to make in case there were mistakes or slight deviations from what you wanted it to accomplish. Okay, now that we have this first script complete, let's turn to another example. As you can see, in each of these PDF files, they contain multiple pages. All of the PDFs in the folder have 4 pages, it looks like. But let's assume that we want to make a script to delete everything except the first page of these PDFs. Now, if we were to do this manually, it would be quite tedious to open each PDF and delete pages 2, 3, and 4. So let's use this exact same process to create a new Python automation to do that for us. So I'll come back to Keyboard Maestro, and actually we can just duplicate this original macro that we made. So I'll copy and paste it using Command-C, Command-V, and let's call this delete all PDF pages except the first one. So now we have a new macro here. Maybe I'll change the shortcut to be Command-Shift-D for delete. But we can essentially just reuse this exact same process. We already have an action that gets the name of the front folder. And then we'll need to, again, update this Python script name itself, assuming we create a new Python script to do this deletion process for us. And then the last action we'll never need to touch. We can always just leave that as is. So let's come back to Visual Studio Code, and I'll create a new chat here to just start from scratch. And again, I will copy the prompt from the macro pack that we downloaded. I'll just copy this bottom part since the first part is just like context of how to write the prompt itself. But let's paste that in and enter our prompt at the top. Write me a Python script as follows. I will give you a folder name that will be stored in the Keyboard Maestro variable called folder name. For each of the PDFs in that folder, I want you to delete all of the pages in the PDF except the first page, which you should leave untouched. Okay, so we just dictated our prompt. Again, I'll change the name of this variable to be the correct spelling and formatting. But now we said, write me a Python script that takes a folder name from the variable and then delete all of the pages except the first page. So let's submit this message and wait for it to create a new script for us. Okay, so it looks like the chatbot finished editing files. I'll press keep to accept the changes. And we can see that it created a new Python file on the left here called keepfirstpagekm.py. So again, let's copy that file name. I'll just press enter and copy the entire name here. And back in Keyboard Maestro in our macro, we can update the name of this Python file. So I'll just paste in the Python script name, keepfirstpage. And now we're ready to test it with the shortcut of Command-Shift-D. So since this macro will be deleting parts of PDFs, it's especially important that we make a copy and we don't edit our original PDFs. Okay, now that we have a copy here, let's open it up and test it out. So again, these all have 4 pages on them and it should delete everything except the first page. So I'll do Command-Shift-D, and it looks like it actually didn't properly delete those PDF pages that it was supposed to. And I think I know why that is. So if we come back to VS Code, we can see that on the left here, there is a requirements.txt file. So sometimes when Python programs are created, they rely on other programs, which are called packages, to be able to do special features like editing PDFs, for example. So we'll need to actually install those extra programs for the script to run properly. So if we come back to Keyboard Maestro in macro number 7 from the Python setup macro pack, you'll see that there is this terminal command in the red comment that we can copy and paste into the terminal in Visual Studio Code. So the terminal is down here. If you don't see it, you can search terminal from the help menu to activate it. Then you can paste in that command and press enter, and that will install the necessary packages. Now, once those are installed, we can test the macro again. So I'll do Command Shift D. And as we can see, all of those PDFs were edited, and now they only contain the first page. So this is the basic approach and system for automating tasks on your device with Python. Now we could even run our other macro and have it rename all of those reports after having deleted them. And we could even think about making more complex macros or automations that would do all of those parts in just a single script or a single macro or keyboard shortcut. If you want to learn about automating stuff on your browser, then you can watch this video next. Thanks for watching.